So today we're gonna just take a little walk around the garden and see what various insects and creatures we can find. And at the moment we're starting with the Tamarillo. And notice I have caterpillar, it's a type of inchworm. I actually have several, partially because I do let things, we even have an egg, another one should be hatching soon. But a good reason I leave so much is because I'm wanting to film and wanting to observe. Plus, I like to leave enough food for the various predators. So anyway, let's head over to the milkweed, which should have quite a few predators and prey. So let's go look at those. So yes, the largest milkweed that I have is along the fence line. So I can't say it's the most attractive part of the garden. But in terms of predator, prey, and just a lot of activity, it truly has become its own little ecosystem. And got more flowers blooming, which has been really great. I know there has been some eggs over here, and have definitely seen some assassin bugs. Get it into better focus there. I was having a huge thing with aphids, but thankfully with the various predators, ladybugs and assassin bugs, most of that has calmed down. I am getting a few more again, but here's something I want to show you of some stink bugs, shield bugs. They've just recently hatched. And they tend to stay, when they're this young, they tend to stay very clustered together. And that's a big indicator you're dealing with more of a, shall we say, prey rather than predator. Because a lot of your assassin bugs and those kinds are going to be they're going to cluster for a moment or two because they're young and they're trying to stay together as a group for protection, but eventually they do start spreading out a lot more. And certainly by the time they got to this stage, they would be spread out because they're on the hunt. Whereas these are wanting to keep themselves protected. But I just leave them. And again, food for others. And we have a long stretch of, again, not the prettiest as far as aesthetics, but definitely has been an amazing habitat for so much diversity. Jumping spiders, assassin bugs, milkweed bugs, hoverflies, hoverfly larvae, which are amazing. So let's walk down a little bit further and see what else we can find. Not necessarily a bug we want, but you could see it just flipped around there. An adult leafhopper. It just flew off, but that was a glassy winged sharpshooter, which I do have quite a few of them around. Adults, nymphs, finding eggs. So if I would say one downside of this milkweed has been the fact that it has at least tried to take over the globe mallow that I have here in the spot, but we'll get past here and we'll see what else is around. As I mentioned earlier, I do still have some aphids. I tend to have what's commonly called the oleander aphid, which is pardon urban noises. Anyway, it is a yellow, sometimes slightly orangish colored aphid. And I believe we have one that's giving birth, actually. The one right there. So that is the difficulty with them, is unlike so many others that are laying eggs, aphids are giving live birth. And often they are born already pregnant. So no, it's not your imagination. They really do seem to show up overnight and take over. And see, oh yeah, right there. It's a leafhopper nymph. So they do have kind of a brown, or actually they start out almost transparent and then can be kind of a very light yellow and then turn more of a brown. And then eventually, in my case, turn into a rather colorful display. Sometimes they can be a little green too, almost the color of this vine here when they're really small. We might find a few as we're looking around. So yes, aphids also can be winged. That's one of the other reasons you get a new colony showing up, is the winged female will find a location and she'll start having little ones, and they will produce, and within a week you've got a whole group of them covering a vine or a plant. But again, I leave them so that assassin bugs and others have something to eat. It's another glassy wing sharpshooter. I like to think of them as the land cuttlefish. because their patterning just is so beautiful. They do make me think of cuttlefish for some reason. So now we're on the other side of the milkweed. Well, actually, I should say the other side of the globe mallow. And milkweed just keeps going. This type will take over if you let it. And that was a type of seed bug that just flew off. I have quite a few of those as well. Anyway, let's go further down, see what else we have around here. So yeah, activity really depends on the time of day, but also the time of year. And some days are more active than others. But there's been jumping spiders and, again, plenty of, and so many different types of bees, not just the honeybees, but the native bees, the mason bees, even leafcutter bees. So I can't think of having a space and not growing several different types of milkweed. But particularly the climbing one, I've greatly enjoyed it, despite the fact that it does take over. You certainly need room for it. And right now, we were observing a, well, sometimes called a flower spider, also called a crab spider, that was floating. And I don't know if you can see that where my hand is, roughly. But they tried to look rather intimidating, and certainly if you are if you're prey for them, then I'm sure they are rather intimidating. Admittedly, they can be one of those that you might get a little scared about because of the fact they do target more than just bugs. They can end up catching bees, but the pros outweigh the cons in that regard. So don't let that discourage you or think that you need to harm them in any way. Let them continue being in your space. Anyway, so we were looking at the peach tree. Unfortunately, I didn't catch the assassin bug before it flew off. Look over here at the other peach tree. On this side, looking at some of the ugly space that's over on that side. I'm still a work in progress. It's going to take time. Have a few remains of lacewing eggs. Larvae have hatched and are out venturing, or they're now have become adults. And then get that to focus or not. Thought I was seeing. Helps if I have the right leaf to show you. There we go. If I looked closely enough, I think that one was still green, so a good chance that one hasn't hatched yet. So we still have more lacewing larvae coming. And again, a huge reason to leave the various aphids and others so that they will have food to eat. Anyway, I want to go over to some of the tomatoes and some other plants, because I definitely know there's a few critters wandering around that. I haven't quite made it over to the tomatoes just yet. Curious to see if there was anything on one of my mulberries. Have been having a few of the assassin bugs here. And had some hatch. Even seeing a few of the flies moving around. Those are actually very helpful, beneficial flies, not just your normal house fly. Usually called long-legged. Well, I don't see, of course it doesn't mean they're not there, but I don't see them at the moment. Seeing some spider activity, which that's also really good. So swing past that and have mesquite. Grapevine that could be doing a little better, at least that one anyway. I have another one that's doing well. Pomegranate, one of many. And then over here we have mostly sweet potatoes, and I had a volunteer tomato for some reason, but this one really hasn't had any activity on it in terms of insects, other than maybe one or two aphids that I've seen. And I don't know if that's just because there's so much other stuff going on, or nobody's particularly found it just yet, but no real complaints on that. And if you've seen some videos of mine, maybe on Instagram or otherwise, this is a pepper plant that had quite a few aphids, and I think there's still some, yeah, let's see if we can not have my shadow in the way. Maybe we can get that in focus. There we go. Aphid mummy remains. And otherwise, this pepper plant has really cleaned up and is looking healthy and still putting on fruit. It was putting on plenty of peppers the entire time. But now there's, all the ants are gone, all the aphids are gone. Anyway, I want to go look at one of my largest tomato plant. So yes, the hose is out. We're keeping it real here. Yes, I had to water this morning, as one does around here. One of my larger mulberry trees, which produced really well this year. And actually, since we're going by, we can check to see if there's anybody on here. Recently had some more assassins hatch on here, actually. Oh, yeah, here was the, get the leaves out of the way. Pardon my hand and all of that, but yeah, that was the recent one. Unfortunately, not everybody made it out, and that does happen. But a large percentage of them did make it, so they're out wandering around and helping to protect things. And also protecting things is having to use fencing because rabbits. That's the primary reason. But once things get large enough, I tend to take the fencing down and just keep it up long enough for things to get established. And sometimes if I have an annual that is really small and it needs to get a little bit more growth on it, but eventually I get to take those down. So then we made it over here to my largest and oldest tomato plant, and it's looking terrible, but it's still producing, putting on new growth. And this one overwintered, so this is more than a year old at this point. So the fact it's still alive and producing, I'm more than happy with. But I did notice over here, go past some of the dead stuff, and I leave up quite a bit of these stems because so many of the damselflies and dragonflies and quite a few others enjoy having something they can sit on top of and scope out their prey. But we come up here, if they'll cooperate, sometimes they don't. And can't tell if I've gotten that in focus or not, but we have a milkweed bug. And we call them milkweed bugs. Yes, they do focus a lot on milkweed, but they're also just interested in seeds, plants in general. But I would not let that discourage you from allowing them to remain, simply because they do at times consume other insects. So while they do prefer seeds and milkweed, and they will focus a lot on the milkweed pods, they will also eat other insects, and I've witnessed it, and it is a little surprising. So I tend to think of them more as a neutral bug rather than a pest necessarily. But if you are having a problem with them, it really depends on how many and what you're trying to accomplish. Like in my case with saving some seeds, I just simply bag off a few of the seed pods and let them develop and have no problem otherwise. And they certainly don't interfere if you're trying to encourage monarchs or queen butterflies or any of the other butterflies. Never have had a problem in that regard. Anyway, let's go take a final look at a couple other spots, and might even circle back around to the milkweed, because I think there was something I wanted to double check and show you. Of course, always a good morning when I can spot at least one of the jumping spiders around here. They're so curious, and don't let their size fool you. They will capture prey that are even larger than themselves. Don't know how well camera's picking that up, because they are tiny and it's also a little windy. So of course the fact that it's now moved to my hand is probably the other reason you're not seeing it. But no, they're completely harmless. They are, if you are scared of spiders, I would say jumping spiders are the first ones to help you reduce that concern. They are more interested in exploring, and sometimes I think they're just as curious about us as we are of them. So I think I managed to let that go and get it off. Go off to explore the area. So let's go over to one of my other plants, trees over in the corner. There's my shadow, so hi. Through the mesquite, past the loofah that's growing. Have this amazing shade tree, growing this from seed, and it's not even 6 years old. And this mesquite is easily pushing 8 feet at this point. Have another old tomato plant over here. That one also overwintered. Didn't do as well as the other one, but another pomegranate. And over here too, what's sometimes called Texas olive, Mexican olive, has probably half a dozen common names, but it has been a great source of food and, well, food for the predators. Predators, prey, have definitely enjoyed this space. Had a number of assassin bug hatchings, and see if we can get that in focus. That is the remains of one of the assassin bug nymphs having molted. Don't know how well that, can't quite tell how well that focused, but you find sort of white encasing. It's not a bad thing. Usually means something has, in this case, a good bug has moved on to another stage of life, so let's quickly head back over to the milkweed, because I think there was one other thing I wanted to see if it was still there and show it to you. Two things I could think of. This one. Some eggs. And I'll leave you to guess as to what those are. I do know what that will hatch into. And no, it's not some unique lace wing or anything like that. But go ahead, let me know in the comments as to what you think that might be, what those will hatch into, or what will hatch out of that. Decided to fly off, but there was another milkweed bug. A little more activity that's happening now that it's getting a little bit later in the morning here. But back down here towards the beginning of where we were at, tucked away here on the plant, is a type of scale more of an armored scale. And I think I have a few others I want to show you. So this is a later stage, and there are eggs inside of this. Thousands, easily. So they'll eventually emerge, and they will crawl to their own spot, and then they will settle down and feed on the plant, which is why you normally don't see scale moving or doing too much of anything, really. But they are creating problems for your plant. But again, I'm leaving it alone and letting nature sort things out. Let's see if we can get that in focus. Because nature has sorted things out for the most part around here. Have the remains. You know, it's a little bit in shadow, so it might be hard to see. But aphids that have been dealt with. So, and plenty of others that just, like I said, just the remains of them. So a little bit, shall we say, younger scale. How well that's focusing. That's, I think, a little better. But you really can tell between that or mealybugs, they are not moving. Generally, they found their location. They're going to stay as stationary as possible once they found their spot. But yeah, I'm just letting them be, and allowing the ladybugs and other nymphs and assassins take care of the problem. Which I know that's difficult, to avoid chemicals, to leave various what we call pests. But at the end of the day, if we are wanting the ladybugs, the assassin bugs, and all these others that we call beneficials to show up, we have to leave food for them. And food is not just the flowers. It's also the pests. Because if there are no aphids, there's very little reason for most of these predators to show up. So something to think about, and I'll catch you next time.